Okay, so here's a model of the F9F-5 Panther in a game I play called War Thunder. To sum it up very briefly, it is basically a early World War II to Vietnam War genre game. It takes aircraft, tanks, and in the future they're going to add warships, and it basically bundles them all into one game. But the focus of today is the Panther, not everything else. So, what do we have when we look at the Panther? If we take a look at its stats and what it can equip, it has four 20mm AN M3 cannons with 760 rounds of ammo in total. So when we look at this, the cannons are located in the front of the nose. They're forward firing. Anywho, so when we look at the abilities of the Panther, we see that out of a 10-point rating, this game has given the overall performance of this aircraft a 9.0 out of 10. So, as you can imagine, it's really good. When you go in depth, though, you see that its maximum speed is at 604 miles per hour. So that's the fastest this aircraft can go without the entire infrastructure of the aircraft literally ripping off and the whole thing just like disintegrating in midair. This speed can be achieved at a maximum height of sea level. So this is a naval jet fighter, as I mentioned. So, it's going to be performing like around sea level. Most aircraft in mid-World War II actually performed at a maximum height of 10,000 feet. They were never at sea level. They were around 9,000 feet to be above the cloud cover so that ships wouldn't spot them and they could engage enemy aircraft safely. This, I mean, it looks like it was built to perform at sea level. So if you're going to the dive and then you flatten out right at the sea level, you can hit a maximum speed of 604 miles per hour, which, believe it or not, is actually, I'm going to put it this way. In the general way, it's pretty fast. In terms of today's jets, it's not at all slow, but today's jets, this is rather slow compared to those. Anyhow, its maximum altitude, before you have the same problem of the aircraft like compressing and all these other weird things. So anyway, it can perform at a maximum altitude of 41,000 feet. As I mentioned before, naval aircraft performed during World War II at a maximum height of about 10,000. Multiply that by 4, that's pretty high. If you look at the turn time, the time it takes to turn this aircraft in 360-degree turn is 27 seconds. That's not exactly a tight turn, but it'll do. Its rate of climb, so the amount of feet per minute it climbs, is 4,803 feet per minute. So if with that maximum height of 41,000 feet, even though it's never going to perform that high, you figure it would only take you about 10 minutes to hit that height. And if you go half of that, it's only going to take you 5 minutes to hit about 20,000 feet, which is a really good rate of climb. So you can get up high and then you can swoop down low when you find your engagement. And it takes at least a minimum, like the speed it takes to speed up from a complete stop is 2,624 feet, meaning it needs 2,624 feet of runway, or else it's going to just like be a really fast car, basically, with wings strapped to the side and a jet-mounted engine. When we have a look here at the armor modification, which shows us how much armor this aircraft has, and I believe that all aircraft nowadays, like fighter jets and stuff, I believe all aircraft have some armor to protect their pilots and their crew, even, like for multi-bombers with more than one person. But nowadays we really just use drones and stuff. But back then, armor was not at all an uncommon thing. All aircraft pretty much had armor of some sorts. It didn't have to be extremely thick, but it was relatively thick. So when we look at the F9F-5 Panther's armor, up front it has 60 millimeters of bulletproof glass. Now, the only angle at which this would protect you as a pilot, because there's nothing up front other than like your computer that you really need that this could protect, you're pretty much going on a head-on engagement, which is going to protect your face, really. So when you look at it from this angle, it's sloped at a 63-degree angle, and it's 60 millimeters thick. However, there's a thing with armor, and this applies to pretty much everything in life. As it goes back, and it's not like the thickness is changing, it's always going to be that thick, 60 millimeters thick. But as it goes backwards on a head-on like pass, as it goes backwards, or even to the side like that, the thickness of the armor, which is called effective armor thickness, goes up as you go backwards, and sometimes the angle increases as well. That mostly occurs on tanks, though. Here's an example. When you throw a ball against like a wall that's at like an angle, so say like a 63-degree angle, like this. When you throw a ball at it, and watch my cursor, because this is an example. When you throw a ball, instead of it just bouncing right back to you, it's actually going to bounce up and away because there's nothing there. But if there's another wall right here, it would bounce up and back at you. So the way to think of this is when you're shooting a bullet at this thing, it's actually going to go like either up, side, it doesn't matter. It's not going to go in. If this was a flat surface like this, which is literally like it has no angle whatsoever, the armor, well, when you're going face on at it, you can move your cursor as much as you want. It doesn't change. But notice when I hover over this armor right here versus the bulletproof glass and I go back, the armor goes up. When I move my mouse around this, it goes up by 1/100th of a millimeter, and I'm not perfectly head on to that. So you can see how this affects the pilot. It protects him. The other thing we have is behind him, protect his head, as well as, fragment from being shot from behind. He has 8.5 millimeter steel slat right there to protect him from fragmentation, as well as the back of his head. And then to protect his legs, I'm not really sure why, and here's why I'm not sure why he has that. All he has up here is his offensive armament. So if he gets shot in the leg, I mean, that's a terrible thing, don't get me wrong. A bullet to the leg must be, excruciating. But you don't really need your legs. So, when you get shot in the leg, I mean, I guess the worst that could happen is you bleed to death. But, I don't know. Whatever. It's there. It's 9.5 millimeters of thickness. And what's crazy? This is thicker than that. This is the back of the pilot's head. You shoot someone in the head and they're going to die. But if you shoot someone in the legs, they're not going to die. So why is this thicker than that? I don't know. So anyway, there is the armor. So next we will show you the X-ray of it. Alright, so here we go. X-ray mode. Here we are. So you ever wondered what these things were? You thought they were decorative, or you ever seen them on the bottom of planes? These, I'm going to call them buoys. That's not at all what they are, but you know what I mean. Well, what do you think they are? I'll give you 3 seconds to guess. If you thought anything other than fuel tank, you were dead wrong. These, on the sides of the wings, are actually used for fuel, as well as the fuel tanks in the middle. So that gives the aircraft extra fuel when it is, in the air. So if they get shot off, the worst that can happen is they blow up, set on fire, and start burning your aircraft in. So they are just really for decoration as well as extra fuel. Not to mention that when you look here, there's a massive fuel tank right behind the pilot, which is not very convenient considering, when you look at it, if you get shot from that angle, there's probably, when you look at the edge of the ending of this fuel tank, The difference between that is probably about 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters to a couple inches. That means that you could be shot from nearly 360 degrees in that general area, like that tail section, and you're just going to blow up. If you don't blow up, you're going to burn to death, which is not at all convenient. So if anything, I would have probably taken the armor on his legs, which he doesn't need, and put it over this massive fuel tank, which is a giant weak spot for this aircraft. If you're wondering what these little lines are, these are basically, he moves the joystick left, this wire sends electricity volts down here, tells this thing to move that way, and sends another one down this volt, and goes that way, making the aircraft turn. When he pushes the pedal inside of the aircraft, that way, it sends messages down this wire to tell the the tail to go to the left, and your aircraft will start turning to the left. The same is for the elevators. So to sum it up, when you have an aircraft, because I don't think I mentioned this before, you have ailerons. These are the two wingtip sections, which you'll see me use a lot in the little montage video, I guess. The flaps are used for multiple things. There are different functions. You have landing flaps, in which they go all the way down, trying to stop your aircraft to slow down from that massive 604 miles per hour. So there's landing flaps. Then there's combat flaps, which weren't added until later in the war, World War II, which actually helped tighter turns, as well as slowing the aircraft down a bit, so that during combat, when it's doing all these massive maneuvers and stuff, it can just perform tighter turns than the enemy. And lastly, you have your tail, which literally, if you're not touching anything but the pedals there, this turns to the right, which makes your whole aircraft go to the right, it literally almost turns I can't think of an example, but it literally makes it just turn. The whole aircraft turns. Left, left. And these things on the back here, these are the elevators. They make it go up and they make it go down. That is literally their sole function. They do not do anything else, nor the tail. The ailerons, however, have multiple purposes. As I said, they have different flaps. The ailerons, though, these are different than the flaps. I'm sorry. The ailerons make your aircraft, in midair. Picture a flying plane. Doesn't matter if it's this plane, whatever. Picture a plane. Like a jet, like a passenger jet. The ailerons on the plane actually, if you notice, these turn down, these turn up, and the plane turns that way. It rolls counterclockwise. If you do that, turns down, this turns up, it rolls clockwise. And this is something that jets, but propeller aircraft are better at it, allowing them to roll. So yeah, that is the multiple functions of the aircraft.